Good morning and welcome. We're here this morning to launch the most recent Community Police Relations Initiative for the City of Stockton, the City Managers Review Board. We're also here to share some of the work that is, has, and continues to be done as a part of our overall police community collaboration and engagement efforts. Chief Eric Jones will talk about this more shortly. The way that this is structured, I will provide an overview of the initiative. Chief Jones will provide some comments. He and I will engage in a Q&A with you all. Then the mayor and council members will offer remarks. Then we will have a wrap-up Q&A, and then we'll close out the press event. As I mentioned, partnering with the city manager on this is Police Chief Eric Jones. This is a joint initiative between the Office of the City Manager and the Office of the Chief of Police. At this time, I'd like to acknowledge our Mayor, Michael Tubbs, our Vice Mayor, Dan Wright, Council Members Jesus Andrade, Christina Fugazi, Paul Canepa. Thank you for being here. Going back to the beginning of the pandemic, Chief Jones and I had numerous discussions about the happenings that have transpired throughout the country and the world since the death of George Floyd. We have inventoried all that the Stockton Police Department has and continues to do in its pursuit of 21st century policing excellence. The department has achieved a lot in this regard. It has been an early adopter of body-worn cameras, has relentlessly and continues to relentlessly pursue opportunities for community engagement, served as a partner at the table for the White House's Task Force on 21st Century Policing, always looking to get better. The chief and I agree that if you are not always looking to get better, you are falling behind. This initiative is not intended to replace anything that is currently in progress or currently in place. This is a voluntary initiative that makes sense for the present and the future. It provides an opportunity for us to do something on a large scale that will set Stockton apart from its peers and allow us to make a difference in the lives of Stocktonians. This is about the pursuit of policing excellence through data-driven collaboration. The time is right for an initiative such as this. We have leadership alignment on our side. The city manager, our police chief, and our mayor and council are all of like minds on this topic. This is not something that I would pursue absent this alignment of leadership. So at this time, I will provide an overview of the initiative, the City Managers Review Board. This, in short, is a voluntary self-monitoring function for the City of Stockton. The City Managers Review Board, I'll refer to it as the CMRB, is being established to continuously pursue 5 goals. Goal number 1, police officers and community members will become proactive partners in community problem solving. Goal 2, strengthen relationships of respect, cooperation, and trust within and between police and communities. Impact education, oversight, monitoring, hiring practices, and mutual accountability of the Stockton Police Department and the community. Ensure fair, equitable, and courteous treatment for all. And goal number 5 is to create methods to establish the public's understanding of police policies and procedures and recognition of exceptional service in an effort to foster support for the police. The purpose of the CMRB is to support the city's efforts to meet the 5 goals and support the city in its ongoing effort to collaboratively promote comprehensive public safety strategies, build, enhance, and expand relationships with our diverse local communities, and influence the acquisition and distribution of resources in support of this effort. The City Manager's Review Board will deliver information, analysis, advice, and recommendations to the City Manager in order to guide the ongoing continuous improvement of community police relations. In terms of some of the principles that will guide the work of this board, the CMRB information will be made publicly available to the maximum extent possible. All discussions will be respectful and fair. Many conflicts can be addressed through careful analysis based on detailed information and a willingness to explore a wide range of alternatives. Through comprehensive measurement, we can determine if progress is being made towards the pursuit of the 5 goals that I previously mentioned. The scope of work for the board will entail a focus on the review of policies and practices. The CMRB's work will include, but not be limited to, a review and analysis of citizen complaints, police calls for service, officer-involved shootings, use of force, assaults on officers, Part 1 crime incidents, shootings, traffic stops, community problem-oriented policing projects initiated by the department, public appearances and community engagement projects initiated by the department. The membership of this board will be comprised of 25 individuals who will be appointed by the city manager on a volunteer basis, and will be a cross-section of individuals representing the city of Stockton in terms of experience, expertise, and perspective. Members will come from the following sectors of our community: city manager, Stockton police chief. There will be representatives from clergy and the interfaith community. We will have the perspective of the behavioral health community. We will have community leaders and activists as members of this board. We will have representation from the human services community. Our Police Officer Association president has already agreed to serve as a member of this board. We will also have persons recognized as problem-solving and conflict resolution experts and leaders in our community. And we will also have a youth and young adult perspective represented on the board. In terms of next steps, over the next 30 to 45 days, Chief Jones and I will be working to further build out the board itself. We have received commitments from 9 persons already who will be appointed to the board. In late August, we will convene the board for an orientation session. In early September will be the first full meeting of the board. The board will meet on a quarterly basis. There will be ad hoc meetings in between each quarterly meeting. All of the work of the board will be shared with the public in terms of quarterly report outs. We will establish a web presence for the board on the city's website so that the community and anyone interested in the work of the board will be able to follow everything that we do. So at this time, as I said earlier, Chief Jones and I, we are of like minds in that if you're not continuously looking to get better, you're falling behind. So even if you're good, you got to work hard at staying good. So with that in mind, Chief Jones, please provide your comments.
Thank you, City Manager. And I want to thank you for this opportunity, and I too want to acknowledge and thank all of our mayor and city council members, vice mayor, council members who are here. Thank you for your ongoing support for the great work that our police department does, and recognizing that we're advancing this work and even moving into the next evolution. Law enforcement absolutely is difficult. American policing in America is absolutely difficult, not just because of the dangers inherent with doing law enforcement work, but just the challenges that we're facing in this region and across the nation. And I think it's important for us all to recognize those dangers, especially when we have some officers being ambushed. Is a couple just as recent as a couple days ago in Texas, and we know it's a hard job to do, but I'm just so thankful that we have men and women that are still willing to do this work and continue to do such a great job. Here in Stockton, our officers handle about 1,000 calls for service per day. So think of that, about 1,000 times per day, our officers are interacting with members of our community. And many of us never hear about those contacts, but they're doing it behind the scenes all the time. And I'm proud of the work they do. They are very brave officers, but we are a brave department as well. And what I mean by that is we are leaning into this work, advancing this work of examining our police policies, furthering the work of expansion on police community trust issues. And we've been ahead of, as a police department already and as a city, many of the issues that we're facing right now. So I was just going to walk through fairly quickly a lot of the work we've done, which sets up the foundation for where we are moving as a police department and as a city. As many of you know, we participated voluntarily for the National Initiative for Building Community Trust and Justice. And there were only 6 cities across the nation that did this. It was the largest venture in history for policing on how can we further build police community trust, how can we measure it. And the Urban Institute actually did a full academic study of the national initiative, and I'm proud to say of the 6 cities, we actually had the most progress for that continuing path of building community trust within our police department. We've partnered with the Center for Policing Equity. We continue to partner with them. And for both the national initiative, for the Center for Policing Equity, for the Urban Institute, we opened our doors, and that's how I feel we're very brave, and it's a risky move. But as a police department, we opened our doors and said, come in, analyze us, take a look, examine where we may be able to do better best practices than we're doing. And that's that continual path toward excellence, as any organization should do, but especially a police organization should always be willing to move the work forward. We also were part of the 21st Century Policing Task Force, one of the assessment crews on that. And there were many recommendations that came out of that report. The Stockton Police Department does virtually every single of those recommendations. Is that enough? No. Again, we realize that this is a path forward that is never ending. This is not a destination where you reach police community trust and you say you're done. We realize it's a path that is continually moving. We're also one of the first agencies in the nation to do racial reconciliation. One of the first agencies to do principled policing, teaching it statewide, working on implicit bias, procedural justice training, police legitimacy training. And again, I'm very proud of the men and women of the Stockton Police Department that not only embrace these trainings and policy movements, but are actually teaching it to other agencies around our region and around the nation. We also formed the SAFE Coalition in the past few years, which is moving not just this work within the policing world, but also into the criminal justice sphere beyond just policing. And that is in the SAFE Coalition, which is the Stockton Alliance for Equity, which is, again, something that we've partnered with our local sheriff, other police chiefs, the district attorney, public defender's office, behavioral health services. So we recognize that shared safety is more than just police, right? It's many organizations, many agencies, and the public itself. So again, this is the next evolution is the way we see it, the City Manager's Review Board. This is taking the foundation of the work we've been doing from my Police Chiefs Community Advisory Board, all of the trust building work we've been doing, and moving it, advancing this work forward. And I think this is pretty amazing because we're doing this as something we see that our city needs and deserves. It's not being forced by a consent decree. It's something that we, through our discussions with the mayor and council, we feel that as a city, this is something that really should be furthering 21st century policing excellence. And we embrace that. And I want to end by this. We all want two things. We want safer communities, and we want to reduce the amount of police encounters that end in negative outcomes. If we all want those two things, why can't we work together? Why can't we have more individuals sitting at the table, moving this trust-building work together? And I know that's going to happen. So again, thank you. Thank you, City Manager, for the opportunity. Thank you, Mayor, Vice Mayor, Council members. And I'll turn it back over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Chief. So at this time, I'm going to ask the mayor and the council members who would like to provide comment to provide comment, and then once they're done, we will phase into a question and answer session for you to answer any questions that you might have. Mayor?
Well, thank you, City Manager, and thank you, Police Chief. As you all know, throughout the nation, we're engaged in a necessary conversation about what policing should look like in the 21st century. And as the Police Chief and City Manager said, Stockton Police Department, just like every other department in this country, won't always get it right, but we are committed to the fact that we will always strive to do better. We saw with the George Floyd uprisings and civil unrest throughout this country, even in our city, that the work we were doing with trust building, with principal policing was necessary, but not sufficient, and that there was more we can do to continue on the journey, as the Police Chief said, to arrive at a spot where we have good police-community relations. So this new review board is an evolution of that. It's responsive to the demands we've heard from protesters. It's responsive to the 10 demands of the local NAACP. It's responsive to what's needed in this moment. And what's needed is, again, for us to really do the hard work of looking at sort of how do we best equip police officers, but also the community, to create the safety that we all deserve. So part of it, we'll be looking at sort of what all our calls for service. The police chief mentioned 1,000 calls for service, and part of the work of this board will be looking at those calls and seeing which of those actually require an officer and which of those would be better off served by a social worker, by a mental health therapist. It will allow us to look at our policies to ensure that when the public is reporting things that happen, that they can be rest assured that we're holding people accountable. And again, it's just one more tool in our toolbox. And as we've said repeatedly, Chief Jones and his officers do an amazing job of this. We can't go back in history and rewrite all the harms that have been done, particularly by police in this country and in this city. But what we can do moving forward is use data, use science, use basic human dignity and empathy to ensure that we don't repeat the mistakes of the past, and that Stockton PD remains a model. Not for perfection, but for continuous progress and evolution. And I'll conclude by saying thank you to the community. I've been on calls with elected officials throughout this country who have marveled at the way in which Stockton citizens have taken to the streets, but in a way that wasn't destructive, that was very constructive, and actually brought us to this moment. So to all the organizers, the young people, the folks who come to the city council meetings and spend their 3 minutes telling us all the things we need to do better, I just want to take a moment to thank you. Today, this is a win for you all as well. And again, we can't do anything by ourselves, but we have to do it together. And again, to the city manager and the police chief, thank you for your leadership in doing this, again, without a consent decree. The federal government didn't come to Stockton and say, you have to do this. The Attorney General didn't come to Stockton and say, you had to do this. In fact, the opposite. Most of the conversations we have with folks is like Stockton PD is doing so well. But again, we're not resting on our laurels. We know there's work to do. I'm excited and looking forward to the work of the police department, the city manager, and the community in making sure that Stockton remains a model for what 21st century policing should look like. So again, thank you and congratulations to the community.
Thank you, Mayor. Vice Mayor Wright?
Thank you, Mr. Black. I'm very proud of this moment. I've been proud of our police department, but this makes me even more proud, if that's possible, because of, as the chief says, he's leaning into this issue. This is something that communities are grappling with across the country. Some are doing a better job than others, but I'd like to think, and I think there's significant evidence that Stockton is at the forefront of this, and we are leading. The mayor gave a little testimonial to our recent interactions with the community, and I think my proudest thoughts go to the interaction between our community-based organizations, the protesters, and our police department, that we worked out a way for this not to become a violent manifestation that we saw in a lot of the other communities across the U.S. I look forward to this resulting in some new opportunities for the city of Stockton. I've already had some conversations with the chief and the city manager. I'm moving more toward restorative practices as a model, and having the opportunity to re-engage those who have been arrested and incarcerated, and making a pathway back to becoming more productive parts of our community. I'm not blind to the fact that violent crime exists in our community, but I think that it exists out of, in some cases, rage, and in other cases, out of need. And so I think if we have a process where we integrate people back through county probation, through a model that respects our community, we hold them to accountability, but we also respect them, and we know that as basic human beings that they can be better, and we can be better as a community. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Anyone else would like to offer comments? Councilman Andrade.
I'm challenging the council members to say something as well. So let me take this off. I'll just be brief. Today I'm extremely proud of being a Stocktonian, a council member, serving my last year on term, and so this is a big deal for me. And I'm also proud of the work the police department has done for years. When I think of what the initiative means, this initiative by a city manager and the work the police department is going to do with the community, I think back to an image I saw on Facebook. It was an image right in the heat of the protests that were going nationwide, and it was an image that was particular to us here in the city of Stockton, that showed in one picture, captured everything of the work that the police department has done, that prior councils have initiated. And it was a picture of our police officers shaking hands with the protesters. It was an image of a little young girl and several black mothers, it seemed like, that were in line shaking hands with our police department. And you contrast that with what we saw across the country in cities not too far from us, in the Bay Area here, and it just shows that level of trust between our police department and the community was shown in one picture. The years of community trust building, of speaking with the community, of being available to hear the concerns, and really putting into practice what we preach as a department was captured in one picture. And it shows that we're listening, and I say we're listening, not we have listened, because we've been listening to the community for years, and this initiative is just another iteration of us coming to the table with the community, but now bringing them with us, right? And really showing that we're going to be transparent about how we police, that we're going to be transparent about how we care about people, about our community. Those are bold initiatives that I implore other cities across the country to take as well with this new review board. It just shows, again, that we have done the work. We're going to continue to do the work as a city. And it just shows that we're ready to grow up. We're ready to really bring in the community and make sure that everyone feels safe and listened to, from those from the north, south, east, west part of the city. And so, again, I'm very proud of the initiative that would be led by the city manager's office and our police department. And please count on us as council members to come along as well to help out however we can. So, again, thank you for the opportunity, and I'm very proud today.
Thank you, Councilman. Okay, at this time, we will open the floor for any questions that you might have. We have some materials that we'll be handing out as well. So if there are any questions, we'd be delighted to respond to them.
So, I'm Alejandra with Telemundo. So there's 9 people that you guys already pick. Are you going to tell us who they are and what are the roles that they're gonna take?
Not today. Once we have assembled the entire board, we will announce formally who the members are and provide some additional information, some bios, some background information on them. But we're not quite there yet, but we hope to be there within the next 30 to 40 days.
And I know they're going to meet every quarter, but then do they have to present findings, or do they have deadlines to do this kind of job?
Yeah, when the board meets on a quarterly basis, these will be basically half-day meetings. And the reason why they're quarterly is because it will require a tremendous amount of planning and preparation in terms of getting ready for the meetings. The meetings will focus on data analysis. We will pick several subjects. For instance, it could be citizens' complaints, it could be traffic stops, you have it. So what we will be doing jointly in terms of our Office of Performance and Data Analytics, as well as with the police department's criminologists, they will be working together in concert to prepare all of the documentation that we will need to follow as a part of the meeting. And the documentation will be both qualitative and quantitative. So it's going to be a very intellectual, very collaborative, very deep dive into a lot of data. What is it telling us? What is it not telling us? What do we think about it? How do we feel about it? And hopefully, if we do it the right way, we will experience significant insights that we can follow up on from an actionable standpoint.
And is the city gonna be obligated to follow their recommendations?
Well, again, if we do this right, in the spirit of continuous improvement, collaboration, I don't foresee that as being a problem. We're going to have 25 people around the table. These are going to be different perspectives, different energy, and we'll be talking about a lot of very difficult subjects. But that's good, and that's okay. The idea is to get to the point where we discover insights, where the light bulb comes on for everybody at the table. This is very interesting. We need to do something with this. So I don't know if that answered your question. Yeah.
200 review boards across the country from police agencies. And you go over the advisory group, like Chris suggested, but some have subpoena powers, some have investigative powers. What about an officer-involved shooting? How would they handle that?
This group would not look at an individual officer-involved shooting. They would look at the totality of any officer-involved shootings over a period of time, doing a deep dive into the data related to it, both qualitative and quantitative. The idea for this group is to impact policy and practice. What we're setting up here really is a voluntary self-monitoring capability and function. Typically, as the chief and as the mayor have stated, those types of functions and entities are usually put in place pursuant to federal action, federal judicial action. Not the case here. Lots of community complaint authorities, citizen review boards, subpoena power. But if you look at all of these efforts across the country, there are some successes, but the results are really lackluster, and it's because there's a tension, there is a dynamic of force which does not really support creativity, sharing, honesty. So what we're doing here is we're experimenting with doing it a different way. So we'll see. We'll see what we get from it. I am optimistic that we're going to get a lot from it because it's a voluntary effort. It will be a very structured effort. our meetings will be a half a day, but we will be covering a lot of territory, a lot of ground, and we're going to learn a lot from each other. We're going to better understand each other's perspectives. We're going to become more empathetic as a result of this experience. And we're going to get the benefit of 25 bright minds as we look at what we do today and how we do it. Subpoena power. My views on subpoena power, I believe it has its place, but I also believe that if you have to assert subpoena authority, you've already lost the game, in my view. Because it creates a different dynamic that's not necessarily geared towards collaborative problem solving and strategy.
Would the board be able to make personnel recommendations? So, for example, if during the conversation there's an individual officer who has multiple complaints, would the board be able to make recommendations on that?
The board will look at, let's say, citizen complaints or something of a behavioral nature from a high level, looking at the totality of all of the data that we have related to that subject. And that data will tell us things. We will discover insights from looking at this data. And from that will come actionable recommendations to the city manager, to the police chief. And all of this will be transparent, will be reported out. We're going to look at traffic stops. That's always an interesting area to look at. It's going to tell us a lot. And there are going to be some actionable recommendations that will come out of that review and analysis.
Do you believe data tells the whole story? You keep saying data, you're going to be reviewing data, analyzing data. Do you believe numbers and data tells the whole story?
It can tell the whole story if you've got the right data capturing capability and systems in place. Because it's going to show patterns, it's going to allow us to discover insights that we otherwise wouldn't really know. We can study an individual situation, but we're going to be limited in terms of what we get from that one situation. But if we look at many, many situations that are going to vary, we're going to see more, we're going to learn more.
Are you concerned that when you're looking at data that you're seeing numbers and you're not seeing people?
They're going to be one and the same. The makeup of this board will not allow us not to look at all of this work from the perspective of people. That's why the diversity of this board is very critical. We're going to have people on this board that are going to be, we're all going to be very community, people-centric. It's just that the data will allow us to operate in a very efficient way to really generate value back to the city.
Real quick, adding to that, exactly as the city manager said, the data is absolutely critical so we can objectively look at patterns and things going on in the department. But of course, we're going to hear the stories from these over 20 members of the department. They're going to have personal stories that they're going to be sharing as well. And between the two together, I think we're going to be able to really drill down into a lot of these issues that are gripping the nation and our community. You had a question, I'm sorry.
Yeah, you mentioned this kind of briefly. Your department has had a community advisory board since 2012, and it includes a lot of people in those sectors that you mentioned. How is this new board going to be different than that? What type of change are you guys looking for?
Yes, so since 2012, we've had a police chiefs community advisory board. And so similar makeup as far as the number of involved, over 20, cross-section of the community, also clergy, business leaders, community leaders, different organizations. And the difference here is the Police Chiefs Community Advisory Board has a very laser focus on relationship building and building trust between police and community. And so they've helped lead, and it's just been incredible work they've done. They've looked at some of our policies and given input, but they've also led a lot of courageous conversations, because what we're talking about today and what we were talking about in 2012 are very difficult conversations we have to have, especially when we're talking about race relations and as it pertains to police. So those courageous conversations with the Police Chiefs Community Advisory Board will continue. The Police Chiefs Community Advisory Board will continue its work. This is a layer over the top of that that actually looks even further into policies, practices, and gives recommendations to the city manager, who ultimately has oversight over me as a police chief. The difference is the Police Chiefs Community Advisory Board gives me recommendations. This new layer we're adding gives recommendations to my oversight.
I have another question. In regards to looking at the calls for service, what is the ultimate goal to analyzing these calls for service? Is that to then find the best way to respond to those calls? Maybe some calls you don't send police officers, you send social workers or human services instead of police. What is the goal of looking at the calls for service?
I'll just take a quick stab and turn it over to you, Chief. For me, looking at something like calls for service will give us greater insight in terms of what are the real needs of the community. You know, what are we getting called for? Is this a real police matter, or is it something else? It's going to allow us to become better at programming resources and developing strategies for either something involving the police department, or it will give us an insight that the police department is getting 200 calls on this particular type of thing, but it's really not necessarily a police matter. So it will give us the opportunity to look at those kinds of things and say, well, how should we be really dealing with those kinds of things? And so that we can free the department up to do, you know, what it does best. Chief?
Thank you, and I absolutely agree. We're always examining the calls we're responding to and whether police really need to go to them. And there's a lot of gray area here. It's never an easy answer. But, you know, a couple examples of where we've made some progress in these areas already is our county mental and behavioral health services had a mobile crisis response team that were clinicians, police officers are not. Were trained, but were not actual clinicians. And that was a team that was actually able to respond out either with police officers or perhaps maybe instead of. We're completely open to that because it may free us up to go do other things. As well as we recently rolled out a pilot program, the Law Enforcement Assisted Deflection Program, which is where, just in the downtown area with their bicycle officers, but for example, if they've got somebody with a substance abuse issue, maybe a warm handoff to a social worker makes more sense than incarceration, right? So that's a program we've been looking at as a pilot program for the last couple years.
Okay, any other questions? Well, thank you for coming out today. We look forward to you all following our efforts in this regard. And have a great day. Thank you.